ahead and get started. And I want to welcome everyone to our December's webinar. This will be recorded. We are being recorded right now, and so we will be able to share to those that were not able to attend today. I'm Michelle Reeves, the membership with the Lean Jacks, and we also have our CEO, James Bussell, and our guest speaker, Tom Schneider, today, as well as those guests that have joined. Today's topic is going to be on applying continuous improvement and root cause analysis to transactional value streams and processes. This is such a timely topic as we close the year of 2023, and we can probably gain some value in our personal finances as well with all the shopping we've been doing this month. So this is going to be great. I'm looking forward to it. A few housekeeping notes for those that are tuned in already. Make sure that you select the little microphone icon and select mute until we have our time where we're going to have some questions and answers. You can type your questions in the chat box, and I'll be collecting those as we go. And we'll take some Q&A toward the end. It's going to be a very interactive webinar, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker, Tom Schneider, for today and read his bio for you guys. Tom has more than 25 years of experience as a Six Sigma and Lean coach in the financial services industry. In August of this year, he retired from TD Bank, working as a senior manager of process optimization team for the TD Auto Finance Group. And before retiring, served as a senior processing redesign engineer at Citibank and master black belt process design engineer at Bank of America. Tom earned his master black belt in 2005 and has applied Six Sigma and Lean principles in several areas in the banking field, including risk and compliance, operational risk, cross-channel issues remediation, and business controls. Welcome, Tom. Turn this over to you, and we are looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Well, thank you, Michelle. Thanks for the great introduction. I probably would tell you that in ending my career began 25 years ago when I started working in Six Sigma and Lean. It was the greatest thing that could have ever happened to me. I thoroughly embraced it. When I was working at one bank, and they started it, the idea was we had all these people from GE come in, and they said, "Hi, I'm from GE, and I'm here to help." And being a technologist and thinking to myself, and a project manager, you don't know anything about banking. How are you going to help? Boy, was I wrong. I just opened my mind up a little bit and said, these guys probably can help. And they were a tremendous help. And part of it was the conception that, a lot of times we look at it and say, well, Lean is strictly for manufacturing, or Six Sigma is strictly for manufacturing. And it's not. It can be applied to almost anything. Even food service. So anything you think of, you can look at it and say, I can lean that process, or I can do something with that. So today, what I want to talk about is one of the areas that I have always been more of a practitioner than I have been strategic. I'm the guy you call in, and I guess I was like the plumber. Call this guy in, we've got something to fix. We don't know what it is, but we really want it fixed. And so today I'll talk a little bit about root cause and also the continuous improvement side of it. Those were things that I thoroughly enjoyed working in. And I hope that some of this you'll be able to see in terms of looking at it from a standpoint. I'm not sure of your Lean backgrounds or your Six Sigma backgrounds, but one of the things that James and I had talked about, and Michelle, before we got started, is that, a lot of these tools, it's like having a big toolbox in your garage or something. It's pulling the right one out. A lot of times you go to classes and they give you a long list of these are the tools, this is the process, this is the methodology, but it's not necessarily something that you have to follow. It's almost like a cookbook. If you want to add a little more salt, you add a little more salt to the recipe, right? You don't have to do the half a teaspoon of salt. So pick the right tool, use the right tool, and we'll talk about approaches. And one of the things that I'd like to do today, and I'm going to go ahead and start presenting here. And forgive me because, as Michelle said, I have been retired, and this is the first time I've used Zoom since August 11th, to be exact. So here we go. Can you see my screen? Applying continuous improvement and root cause analysis. Good. We'll get started by giving you just an overview. Again, this is the type of thing that I've done, the companies that I've worked with. I did start my banking career out with a bank called Barnett Bank, and I don't know if any of you know that, who that is, but some of you do, I'm sure. The things that I'd like to do today is kind of focus in a little bit on the topics of case studies, things that have happened. We won't mention any names. We'll protect the innocent in terms of where these events occurred. But you understand that there are some things that will happen that I think are indicative of all businesses. Nothing here that will probably surprise you or that maybe you can't relate to. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the tools themselves. These are the tools that I like. I'm going to give you some things that I do use to kind of start out with any type of issue or problem. But as we kind of go through the tools, I'm going to open it up. So if you have any questions about how to use it, when to use it, that type of thing, we can do that too. It just depends. We'll go with the flow and see how that goes. If anybody has a burning desire to talk or ask a question, say, I got a question. Okay. So one of my favorite tools is one of the tools that was my least favorite when I first started using it. It is the is not tool. It is almost a DMAIC. And when I say DMAIC, I mean define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. A lot of the tools that are used here and a lot of the discipline that's used here is important in any type of root cause analysis. And I'll tell you where we use this tool. We used it when we had multiple groups, and what I'm going to refer to it as multiple silos. So think of it in a banking world as I've got credit cards, I've got retail bank, I've got investment banking, I've got all these different silos. We have one common problem and it affects all of them. Typically what you would find is the investment banker would say, well, it's got to be the retail bank side. That's something in that area that's causing the problem. Another one would blame the other. We use this tool to really define the problem. And this was typically called an advanced root cause analysis. And the advanced part is that because we were given roughly 6 weeks to truly define the problem, and that may sound odd to you, that why couldn't you define the problem? You know what one of the problems is, but you don't necessarily know how many areas are being impacted. A lot of times, particularly in transactional analysis, things don't always show up the way you would think they would show up, or an issue might not. But this was a tool that we used, and you can see from some of the questions, what specific object has the defect? What is the specific defect? It sounds like you're getting really granular, and that's because you are. We really wanted to know what, where, when, and how much was the bleeding, and where was it? Did we have a fire across three platforms? Did we have a fire across one platform? And then also we had to look at it from a standpoint of collecting data, validating the data, and then identifying possible causes for those issues, or those problems. We looked at the differences as an example to see, what's different about everything that's in the is category versus the is not. In a quick overview, we'd test possible causes to make sure that that was true, validate. We'd identify technical and systemic root causes. We'd implement some type of corrective or preventative actions. And then probably the most important thing, and this was of all of them, the step that was left out most of the time was the control step. The buzzword today for control, think of it as sustainable. Is it sustainable? Is it going to happen again? That's what the control was all about, making sure it didn't happen again. Where does this problem, where do we find that there may be issues with this? You kind of go into here. This is kind of a graphic of the tools that we used. And again, when I say tools, most of the time it's templates and a methodology. But notice the thing in this area, the define. It is what, when, where, how much, and it's also the flow of the process. Where are the handoffs? What are we looking at? And these are things that, at least from a Lean Six Sigma perspective, are very important. Knowing how many handoffs we have. Can we reduce those handoffs? Are they necessary? Value add, non-value add. And then in this case, the input output timeline of the events that occurred. In a way, when we did these advanced, they're not all like this, but when we did these advanced root cause analysis, they were much like, most of you probably never heard of the show, but a dragnet, just the facts, just the facts. We needed the timeline. We felt like we were detectives. When did you first see it? When did you first see it? That type of thing. So a lot of question and answer. The other part of that was collecting the data. And more important, I think, was validating that the data was accurate. You would be surprised how often data is presented and it's not accurate. When did it come? And then that actually evolved in the banking industry to and I'm sure you guys use something like this, the record of truth, the single point of truth, or the single source of truth. Because at the end of the day, if Tom has $2 left in his checking account, what is that system of record that is telling me that I have $2? Because at any point in time, I could go and look, and Tom could have $10,002 in his checking account. So it's that kind of thing that we look for in terms of the data. And then identifying the possible causes and testing those possible causes to validate what is that really what's happening here. And we'll get into that in more depth when we talk about some of the other areas, but just giving you an overview of this aspect of it. And then identifying the root causes, and then the preventative, and then how do we control it? A lot of times, and this is where people, if you look into this control perspective, the thing that they don't like to do is build out charts to show that, this is in control. Well, it's in control, but when did it go out of control? The other part was, even from the standpoint of an exercise, one of my favorite tools is a failure modes and effect analysis. I, again, did not like that tool when I first was exposed to it, because it seemed like, why investigate what could go wrong? And that's really what that is. It's like, hey, what could go wrong here? What I quickly learned in the industry was that's really important. Knowing what could go wrong and planning in the event that it did, because it probably will. So that's kind of the basis of something called the advanced root cause analysis. You're going to get, we'll talk today, a lot of times it's something very simple. I've gone through all of this, and it turned out to be something that was solved quickly. So again, we were given 6 weeks. Sometimes it took us 2 weeks. Sometimes it took us a week. a lot of that 6 weeks time was based on the availability of the people. Because as you can imagine, if I gave you a task and said, here's a problem, go solve it. If I didn't have the resources to solve it, I can't do that without those resources. I need those resources and I need them to be available. So one of the things that we would do is we'd build out a timeline. This is kind of the project management aspect of this, to set expectations. Are your people going to be available? Like right now, Christmas? Are they going to be off on the holidays? Are they going to be, when can we start? Should we start next week? Should we start 2 weeks from now? So it's that type of thing in planning to make sure that this is successful, because you cannot do this without subject matter experts. It can't be done. You can facilitate, you can learn as much about the product as you can, so that you have credibility, but you can't really do this by yourself. Trust me, I've tried. The next phase is the multi-generation plan. I call it multi-generation plan, and people would always be like, what in the world are you talking about? We just want you to fix this thing. I would use this slide whenever I went in to work with a different executive. I would tell them that, hey, I've set a course of goal here, and I'm looking at your goals. And what I'm trying to do here is, over the next 6 to 9 months or something like that, address your critical needs, stabilize your condition, and build a proactive plan so that you can move forward. That proactive plan is one that is kind of a routine that establishes, go out, get voice of the customer, do Kaizens, do other process improvement efforts as they're required. Build a discipline that says you're not going to be satisfied with status quo, that you want to keep moving. But in order to be in this world here, in the proactive world, you really have to solve these critical needs. Critical needs is a nice way of saying, or less graphic than saying, bleeding. These would be areas where I would say that things were not working in the process. We were not meeting the expectations. We were not meeting service level agreements. We were not meeting the expectations of the customer. Call it what you want, but that's really the critical needs. I think in the banking industry, you can think of it from a standpoint of, when I talk critical needs, James brought up someone today, a particular credit union here in Jacksonville that had a problem. And part of their problem was that they went from one system to another system, and the root cause really turned out to be that they didn't do a lot of testing, and it wasn't scalable in terms of what they were looking at. People were not able to withdraw money. That's a bad problem when you're in the financial business. That was a critical need. I'm sure they worked on that fast. But I'm not necessarily talking about, in this case, those type of critical needs, but definitely something where there's some type of bleeding going on. Customers calling because they didn't get some documents. Customers calling because some type of email was sent to them, or the balance was wrong, or how we handle the number of fraud cases and that type of thing. So this particular tool, loved it, because I always thought of it as something that was a good way to start and set expectations when working with a different business executive. We use this in many areas in terms of it, but the whole idea is, at a high level, you're implementing a discipline. Another thing that you'll hear often in this world is standard work. This was a way to standardize our work. This was an expectation. This was our mantra. This is how we march. And in the Six Sigma world, you hear the word reduce variation. You also hear the thing, variation is the enemy. So the whole concept here was, let's reduce variation out of this process. Let's make it cookie cutter. Today on Tuesday, we're making angel cookies. And on Wednesday, we're making Santa Claus cookies. Okay. And we do that every year. So anyway, multi-gen plan. And then going back to the is not advanced root cause analysis. So that's kind of high level. The next phase of this will be going into some of the actual tools themselves and working on it. But does anybody have any questions or anything like that? I'll just pause for a moment. Any comments?
Tom, maybe once we see it illustrated through some case studies and all, it'll really resonate and loudly.
Let me do that too, Jerry. I think I'm going to, this was a skill I just learned. I'm going to give you a case study and we're going to talk about this. And I just want to kind of get a little feedback from how you would do this or how you would handle that. And I'll show you some of the methodologies that we use. Can you see that?
Yes.
This is a little, and I'm going to give you some background on this. Okay. We won't speak in little acronyms here. So if you don't know what something is, let me know. Expediting HELOCs and HELOANs. Well, a HELOC is a home equity line of credit, and a HELOAN is a home equity loan. Okay. There's a difference between a line of credit and a loan. The important part of this case is something that you may apply is this. We went out and had our existing customers and we said that, hey, existing customers with no second mortgage on your property, we're promising you that we can do a 2-day turnaround for a HELOC or HELOAN once you're approved. We went out, we did trials. They were conducted prior to going live, and the average cycle time was about 1.25 days during the trial. It was launched. It worked well for 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, the service level agreements started creeping up to 2.5 days. Well, when it goes to 2.5 days and you're promised 2, you start to get a lot of phone calls. You start to get a lot of noise going on in the system. But basically, we came in and they asked us, can we fix this? The background, to give you some background on it, the loans were products. They were received at 11 a.m. every morning, overnight, from branch operations. And they were clearly marked so that the mailroom would expedite them. They were in this beautiful orange envelope. And basically, any ideas on why the turn time might be increasing or what could have happened in that place? And this one might be a little bit hard. It's not that you really have to know the process, but just think about what could be the effects, what could be the factors that could be impacting something like this. Well, one of them, let's talk about it. Let's just think about it from a standpoint of, okay, I don't know anything. I don't have any data. What could be one thing? Well, maybe the FedEx or the mail wasn't coming in by 11 a.m. Maybe there was a slowdown. Maybe there were vacations. Maybe there were all types of things. This is a relatively short window of time. But what we did was, as opposed to speculating, because really a lot of times, I know everybody's heard that phrase whack-a-mole. You can play whack-a-mole with problems. You can say, well, let's fix this. Let's fix this. It was this. It was that. One of my favorite tools was called the activity of the product. And the activity of the product, in Tom's mind, is I become the product. I'm that orange envelope, and I walk into this site, and I'm expecting somebody to process me. So I really get into this part of it. So I go into the mailroom. The guy in the mailroom, he looks at me and he picks me up, and he immediately carries me upstairs. Immediately. So I go upstairs, and I'm going to be, the next step in the process is to image me, but create an electronic image. So I get up there and I'm thinking, okay, he's going to image me right away. He doesn't. He puts me to the side, and I'm sitting there until almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And granted, I got there at 8:30. I have not been touched. I haven't been processed. And so finally at 4:30 in the afternoon, and this was the hard part because I wanted to really be the product. I wanted to understand what was happening. He said to me, well, we were told that anything in an orange envelope would be processed after we did everything else during the day. So a complete communication shift. So what would be the first thing that you would ask when somebody said something like that? Well, who told you? When did they tell you? How long have you been doing this? Well, come to find out, the shift, they had changed shifts 2 weeks prior, or recently. And so these people, the people that we had trained, the people that went through the trial, were all gone. They moved to another place, another location. We had a whole new group. That information did not get conveyed to them. There was no control system in place to check it. There was nothing there to fix that. That in itself was the only thing that had changed in the process. But think about it from a standpoint of how would you have determined that if you hadn't walked the process or been the product? And that's where some of this can really come into play. Because think about it, I know your lean aspect of it. My value added time to some extent was, and arguably, was when the guy was carrying me upstairs and when they started to actually scan the documents. It was a fraction of the 8-hour window. The rest of it was waste, right? So that's kind of how we looked at this and how we implemented this. And any questions on that case study? I've got a couple of other ones that I think you'll find.
Well, not a question as much as Tom. I think that's a great illustration. Haven't heard one like that where you could really relate to it because you became the item that was being processed.
Yeah.
And it really illustrates if you do that in a lot of situations, it becomes very apparent where all the waste is and where the value added is and all. It makes it real because in manufacturing, you can see it. But as you know, in the transactional world, it's more difficult to see, but you've explained a way to really able to visualize it.
And Tom, I'll add that this has given me a good idea for maybe a video to do, to whereas people, I'm a piece of paper or I'm you know, a product, and they're actually having to physically carry me. And what do you do? I always use in my 8 ways training, we talk about Mr. DNA, like from the Jurassic Park and the animated video. What are all the steps that Mr. DNA needs to go to become a dinosaur? So it's just that kind of like idea. But to me, like, I think that's very impactful, your story here, because I'm able to picture it, and I'm picturing them moving you up and around the facility.
Yes. Well, and it was fun. And I have to say, now when I did that, I did take a lunch break, and when I came back, I was still there. But yeah, it really is a good, and for me, I think, and anybody that's visual, it's very easy to look at something like that and to do it. I've got another one that's kind of, I'm going to jump to this one here. And this was one of the projects that I was involved in for my lean master black belt. It was, I had a tech, and it's all kind of along that line. And this is technology. So this is what I'm saying is that you can be anything when it comes to lean, as long as you have a good visualization of what's going on. So a technology exec was asked to cut the budget by 10 million in the coming year. Online banking and services were growing. The demand was high, and reducing costs and reducing costs in the other parts of the bank. So, I mean, the tech exec was like, well, I'm doing a lot to cut the cost. I need more. But the demand was so large to increase and improve the instructor, the tech exec planned to increase the budget by 10 million himself for mainframe storage, infrastructure improvements, and that type of thing. The tech exec believed that programming on some of the applications could be streamlined and reduce the demand for additional MIPS. MIPS are millions of instructions per second. Think about that. Millions of instructions per second. And MIPS translate to the need to increase mainframe storage. The more MIPS, the more storage and infrastructure that's needed. Along that lines, any ideas on how you would go about reducing those MIPS? Is the application? It seemed like a good thing to do. So we kind of looked at it and said, all right, let's start talking about the application. Well, based on the activity of the product, I became one of those MIPS, one of those millions of instructions. I tried to visualize, here I am. And let's take a program and let's see which one is our high greatest usage plan. It just happened to be online banking. Well, you start to learn a little bit about the technology. One of the things that was happening is that, I'm sitting there, the first thing it says, key in your password, or key in your name, key in your name. Well, the program called for, there's a name, boom, present. Here's Tom Schneider. We're sitting here waiting for that magic password. Fat finger password goes back. Does it again. Gets the password right. Everything gets presented. We looked at the number of times that we had fat fingered passwords and the millions of instructions per second. And in online banking alone, we were able to save $5 million by changing the program so that we don't send anything until we get your correct password or your correct user code and passcode. And you really have to visualize what's going on. And sometimes in the technology world, that's hard to visualize. But that was another case. And so we started looking at different programs, the second, the third, different program. Basically, we ended up saving well over $10 million and and we didn't have the need to go spend more money. So,
Tom, can you talk a little bit about the team members that helped with this?
Yes.
Because I mean, that's pretty amazing. The $10 million.
Yeah. Well, the technology exec, this was really good, and I was very much. I was very fortunate from that standpoint because the technology exec was going for his green belt, his lean green belt. Mm-hmm. So when the technology exec wanted something, all he had to do was call up the people and say, "Give me the data. I need this. I need that." And so he was getting it. But we had application people. And he had a great understanding of how the applications were written. And a lot of these mainframe applications, it's like, hey, we can be as sloppy as we want to, as long as we get what we need. So we had a lot of technical expertise, and we had a lot of finance people that helped us understand what the cost per MIP was and that type of thing. But that was really a matter of bringing in the right team too. Yes.
So a little question, in addition to really the focused projects, how is this being propagated so that people would look for waste and take things out in their own jobs and all? Was that something that you experienced a lot with at Bank of America and other places you've been?
Yeah. In many ways, that would be the area that I would say, Jerry, would have been the continuous improvement aspect of it as well. And part of it is the sustainability part of any time that you fix something, you're going back to make sure that what you've put in place is still in place. And if not, why not? Have your metrics changed? That type of thing. but several different examples like that. I've seen situations where even something as simple as let's evaluate quickly whether or not the work from home workforce is as productive as the old world of everybody being in the office. Another case would have been something where we looked at, and this really wasn't a project, it was more like, is there a difference? Is there something that we need to do? Is there something we need to change? When we looked at the people and the process itself, were there triggers that we could change? As an example, sometimes an automated decision, think of it this way, you get an automated decision from a computer that looks at your profile and says, boom, Jerry's approved. Well, Tom didn't make the approve, so somebody has to manually look at it. Well, Tom was off by, maybe a 1 score on his credit score or something like that from being approved. Do we change that level and do we change that risk? And a lot of times that's what people in that group would do. So it's a Kaizen type event, if you will. What can we change to improve this, to continue that improvement? What are we hearing from the customer? Voice of the customer is extremely important from that perspective. And that's a good question. And I think back on it, and a lot of times we were very hesitant to change anything without hearing feedback from our associates and the customers in terms of what could we potentially change here to improve this. What's the goal? Interestingly enough,
I'm sorry.
No, interestingly enough, though, anything that you do, if I go back to this, I hesitated to get, if a lot of times things were very squishy, if you will, not well defined. I typically struggled to get people to define this as well as you can, so that we can at least clearly know if this doesn't work, where we've been. Okay, and let's go another route, or let's do something different the next time.
I guess my question, as you started off, you talked about stabilizing things and getting stability.
Yeah.
What were the biggest challenges that you had, that you experienced with getting people to do standard work, not create it and then sustain it?
Yeah, it's I think in terms of doing standard work is there can be culturally, there can be people that are resistant to change, don't want to change, not going to change. And so you kind of look at it from a standpoint of, okay, well, let's see what your standard work looks like. Because to me, you have many flavors of standard work, right? You have, this is what work looks like. In one shop that I knew, standard work on Saturdays was a lot different than it was Sunday through Friday, because Saturday was the biggest day of the week. Things that you did on Friday or Thursday or Wednesday were out the door on Saturday. You ate lunch those days. You ate lunch at your desk on Saturday. But that's a behavior, that's cultural. You see what I'm saying? And then it leads to a whole host of other things. Well, are we staffed right? Do we need more people on Saturday? Why are people, what are we doing right? What can we do? What can we change? And those are things that I think are really important to look into the whole overall picture. And look at where your variation is coming from. Why is it coming? Can you change it? And you can't really change the demand. In that one case, you couldn't. Culturally, the biggest problem that I've ever had or encountered was not necessarily creating standard work or implementing standard work, but was ignoring the fact that there was a cultural problem,
Right.
that there was so many things wrong. And, you know, in the Six Sigma world, we have something called design for Six Sigma, where you would redesign a process because the process was broken. It just didn't work. And let's put it this way, it didn't work at a level that we were happy with or our customers were happy with. Continual breakdowns or something like that would where you would see a lack of continuity or multiple handoffs or things that just didn't make sense. And a lot of times in any world, industry, where that comes from is multiple mergers, multiple cultures, multiple people coming in, that type of thing. I think one of the things that, yeah, to me, people, process, and technology are the important parts. And I notice people are the first part. And Jerry, I know you and I have talked about this before, but if I don't have people and the people that are dedicated to this, then you don't have anything. You don't have a company. I mean, the people make it happen. So they're key. And I think buy-in is something that you have to develop over time. And a lot of people need to see the benefit. Where I told you I was having the cultural problem, the average tenure of that in that division of close to, I think there were close to 400 people. Most of them had been there 20 years.
Right.
So,
You know, Tom, I mean, there's so many pearls and the insights that you're sharing here. It's very valuable. And I didn't mean to sidetrack you, but I really thought that sharing this would even add more, and it has. So it's terrific. Thank you.
sure thing. Well, and I think one of the things that we've got, we've got a couple of things here that this is one that this is one that we kind of talked about a little bit. We hit lane technology. This was one here that I think people would resonates too, and it'll be a couple of core principles. Automating controls sounds like a great idea. In the banking world, we basically undertook AI, automating existing controls where possible or simplify the control process. Many of the controls regulatory in nature. So there was a methodology. Interviews were conducted with people involved in the process. One group had experienced a complete turnover of personnel since the control process was implemented almost 2 years ago. There were 4 people assigned to this team to ensure the process was in control. So in looking at this, one of the first things, red flags came up all over the place when they started saying, we're going to automate all our controls that we can. Because I've been around enough to know that sometimes controls are controlling a bad process or a process that's not running at an optimal level. So now you're going to automate that. You're going to make it worse, in my opinion, because now you're saying, kind of like what you said, Jerry, standard work. Okay, well, now it's 5 widgets a day. That's all we need, right? So anyway, we went into this one group, and through the interview process, it was evident that the new manager and the team, they were doing the work, but they didn't know why they were doing the work. They just said, we don't know where this goes. We know that we put it here. And, they didn't know if they were doing anything that was of benefit. This one person, this was a new manager for about, he'd been there 4 weeks. And he was starting to question a few things, but the controls appeared to be redundant to a similar process that had been automated 2 years ago. Any ideas on what's going on? How would you approach this? Like, what would you do if you were interviewing someone and they were just telling you, well, I've been doing this. I don't really know why I'm doing it.
I think always giving the why is important.
Yeah.
It sounds like that was communication piece was missing on the why of their work. It
Yes.
sounds simplistic, but I would start there and maybe show them why, and that might add some value to that.
Absolutely. You're spot on, because we started asking those questions. Well, why are you doing that? Who told you to do that? When were you told to do that? All these questions. And it was like, at one point, I remember, I can remember myself, this is not an inquisition. We're not judging you. We're just trying to figure out and get to the bottom of this. How did it start? Believe it or not, through questioning, remember Jack Webb, just the facts, man, just the facts. We got down to, 2 years ago, we implemented controls, but we also found out that a person that was in that group and leading that group left that group about a month afterwards. The process that these 4 individuals were doing was put in place to be a parallel process during the implementation. And basically for 2 years, they were providing no value whatsoever, because no one had told them. In fact, the lady, when we ran down who the lady was, luckily she still was with the bank. She said they were supposed to stop that 6 months after we implemented this. They didn't. And in the meantime, they had gone out because of volume increases and added 2 people to the mix. So that was one control we didn't automate. But as good and intentioned as people are, these things happen because people, if I've always kind of looked at it from a standpoint of lean or anything else, if you don't know why you're doing something and you're doing it, then we need to investigate that further. You should be able to say, I'm doing this because I'm going to hand it off to James, and James is going to turn it into our finished product or something like that. That one blew me away when that happened, but it really did happen. That's one of those things that you see on TV, like, this really happened. Okay. Any questions, any comments on that?
Well, I would say one thing, Tom, what you're really hitting upon so heavily on the behaviors, the people side of things, which is so critical. And a lot of people don't pay enough attention, because whether you look at operational excellence, including lean, Six Sigma, theories of constraint, all these different methodologies, it really starts with you're doing continuous improvement. But if you don't show respect for people by explaining why you want them to do it, and start there and put the people first, because once they understand it, you're going to get more traction, and they're going to feel like they're really part of the process rather than having something done to them.
Yeah. Product owners, they own the product, right? They own it.
Hey, Tom, I do have a question. So what happened to the 4 employees?
They were reassigned. They were reassigned quickly. And again, it is in a way a reflection on even the hiring aspect of who you hire and that type of thing. But clearly a case of, and I think one of the fellow that actually assumed the job of manager like a couple of months before we got there, he was starting to question, like, I don't know why I'm doing this, and I'm uncomfortable with this, right? So these things can happen, unfortunately.
Tom, do you think that's important on the front end of any of these types of engagements or solving the problems, to try to communicate what the purpose of the work is supposed to be and then how it contributes to the company's mission?
Most definitely. And that's one of the reasons that again, the visual aspect of this, and I'm a big believer in process maps. And I'll tell you why. And that kind of goes into one of the other slides that I've got here, James, that I'll kind of give you. One of the first steps in solving anything, in my opinion, is to understand the process. Because there's usually, what I have found is there are 3 versions. Sometimes there's no versions of what the process is. But usually there's 3 versions: what you think the process is, what it actually is, and what you would like it to be. This is one of the things that I saw time and time again. And this would be walking the process, right? The muda, the walk. We would, and I'm sorry for those that don't know their Japanese, is because I don't either, but muda, I believe, is walk the process. That's a nice way of saying walk the process.
Tom, you said you weren't going to say Muda. We went through this.
That's right. That's right. But that version of, I can give you cases where we were streamlining a process for home loans, and we got to the process and it looked like, well, this is working well, this is smooth, this is going well. And then all of a sudden they did something that was completely out. It was rework. Why are you doing that? Why are you handling those papers like that? Well, we're handling the papers because I think his name was Cliff, who is the president of this mortgage, wants us to do this on every single loan. And we know it's of no value because the process had been taken out. Again, another case where they're doing work, where people are doing work because they think Cliff wants it done. So we went to Cliff, and when we told Cliff what was being done, he started laughing out loud. He said, I asked them to stop doing that 3 months ago. And the people did, but they created this little team at the end to do this work. It was almost like a quality check that didn't need to be done. Okay. But you find cases like that all the time. And when you said the process, I need to start out with a process map. If I was called into a root cause situation, my goal was to understand as much about the product as I could so that I would have credibility. And what a blessing that we have when we have the internet. I mean, if you want to look up something today on how do you handle an investment for retirees and stuff like that, and what are the rules and what are the laws, it's all there. All you have to do is look it up at the right thing, and it's at your fingertips. So I would do as much homework as possible to understand what the process should look like. What are the key components? What are the critical parts to this? And then understand how we're handling those or how we're working with them. So I don't know if that answered your question, James, but you got me going on process mapping. And process mapping, if you can't draw a picture of it, and your job is to operate in that process, then you probably don't understand the process. That's my motto.
So Tom, for a transactional process that's all in a computer, or that kind of style, how do you go about creating the process map? Because the what you think it is tends to be our perception, right? And then the what actually is that you're going through it. So how does that work when you're doing something that's electronic?
You're kind of hitting, I'm going to go to the value stream here in a way. This particular map that you see in front of you kind of shows, I think, what you're asking, James, in terms of, okay, we have this application. Well, what are the key things that we do? Where does it go? And we look at it from a standpoint, this is a value stream map, but the process map would maybe be more one-dimensional, if you will. As an example, client application. The client application goes into here, goes through this process, into this area. But this is showing an automation flow of the information, a manual information flow, and then a product flow. So it depends on what you're looking at, but you can keep it as simplistic as you want to, but this is more value in terms of what are all the inputs coming into this process. But to keep it at a high level, it's like, here's what my input is, here's the process, and here's what the output is, right? What am I expecting to come out of that? And if something else comes out of that, then, there may be multiple things that come out of that. But the process, how is it handled, that type of thing, that's what you want to deal in with. And from a technology standpoint, a lot of it transactional. You're thinking along the lines of, I pick up my phone and I do something here, and I send Tom $100 on a Zelle thing, transaction. There's a lot of things that are happening there, and we actually, on a transactional level, you're looking for the next stop, because ideally, even though it's electronic, we know where it's going. We know what system it goes into, and we know what we're expecting out. A lot of times it's like, okay, we should get, you're looking at some reconciliations. It's kind of almost basic accounting type things. We're expecting $1 million in wires today. That's what we showed on the first side as inputs. We're expecting to see $1 million in wires on the outside. If we see less, then we have a problem. That's kind of a control that you would put in place. But I don't know, did I answer your question? But it's more along the lines of, what do you expect to happen? And sometimes it's not so manual. Sometimes it's much more manual than it is transactional. Checks, the side that you don't see. Do you think banks love checks, or do you think banks don't like checks? Which way would the bank rather you conduct your transaction?
I vote no for checks.
That's a good no. That's a good vote.
In the cloud. They want it in the cloud.
Yeah. Why? Because they're not touching it. They're not counting it. I've seen a facility where money comes in. Oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe it. It costs a lot of money to handle money, and so it is one of those things that banks are not trying to get you to use your iPhone and stuff like that to conduct your transactions, but for the fun of it. It's good for them, and so you'll see a lot of that in the future, even more so. But I guess really the biggest thing that I would say that was in terms of the process, that part here, time and time again, that was the big thing that surprised me, was when at first it seemed like it was, I don't know, I guess I would say any type of, you look at this and you see the steps here like a time value map. If you can see how long it takes for something to do, the white steps, that's white space. And the objective here is always to get rid of the white space. And when you talk about manual processes, this is exponentially greater in terms of wait time and queue time and things like that. That's why they want to get rid of it.
This is really great. I mean,
another analogy, time is money, right?
Yeah. It's Tom, when we look at it now in the presentation, I mean, you have so much to share. So where would you like to take this particular session and try to come across with the balance of what you want to share today?
Yeah, I think really the balance would be, and let me see if I can, I'm going to kind of click this slide a little bit and And maybe we'll go to here. Because it's kind of like the root causes and the CTQs and that type of thing.
Right.
If I look at this diagram or this slide, you see the importance of the process map. You see
Yep.
the importance of, and even if, think about this, even if you're doing a Kaizen, you don't want to do a Kaizen with people that don't understand the process, right? You want them to at least understand the process or know what the functionality is supposed to do, how they participate in it, the expectation. So it's understand the process. And then it's looking at it from a standpoint of, again, that famous tool, the failure modes and effects analysis. What could go wrong? In many cases, it's not what could go wrong, the question, because what's gone wrong in the past? Did we detect it? How did we detect it? What was the occurrence of this? And those are the types of things that you can flow into. They help you from a standpoint of building that sustainable model. At the same time, you can look at some of these cause and effects, and you can look at the CTQs, or what's important, what are the things that we should go after, what caused the problem. And as Michelle said, the 5 whys, a powerful tool in terms of why is this happening? And it's not really, I think maybe we demonstrated that in some of the cases. It's not just necessarily why. It's why, when, where, who, how, because that ends up like, little multiple problems. And when people think, I did, when I first heard root cause, one single cause, it's not true. There are multiple causes that can cause a problem, multiple breakdowns. Handoffs, as an example, as we clearly demonstrated, I hope, in that example with the mailroom. That's a handoff problem. Something wasn't communicated properly. Something wasn't procedurally sound. So I think in terms of looking at it from that standpoint, Jerry, there's a lot of tools, but the things that I've always kind of fell back on is really understanding the process, looking at identifying the potential root causes of that problem, and then identifying the risk associated with it. Because if I think I'm fixing something, and I've done this before too, I've found that no, you're not really fixing anything, you're making it worse. And that can easily happen. You have to be very careful with that. But potential root causes, that's a tool, the fishbone. And then again, I would probably say something to walk away with. You can't do this on your own. You need a team. That team has to be subject matter experts, and you need the complete involvement of those people. So I think in terms of leading it, one of the things that I've always tried to impart on people is that you've got to really get them involved and keep them involved in that effort. Because if they're daydreaming or not really involved, you don't know. I think it's changed a lot, particularly with the advent of Zoom. But it's kind of helps in terms of you can see who's on, who's not on, that type of thing. But I think those are areas that I would look at. I think the other aspect of this is the sustainability of this. I have used in some cases, as an example, we have banks. Obviously they have vaults. There are redundant controls in those vaults. A typical control is like a maker checker. At the end of the day, I count the money, you watch me count the money, you count the money, we all put it back. We all agree that we just put all these money from our cash drawers back into the vault. There's a camera, it's looking at it. We also have technology that we had employed that said, take this bundle of cash and drop it into this machine, and it counts it, and it's never wrong. And so there's like 4 or 5 different controls there. Did we need all those controls? We did an FMEA on it and said, stop it. We don't
But just
need,
some feedback to you, Tom, on this presentation. I think it was exceptional. And what I would say is, Ken Blanchard, a 1 Minute Manager, famous for that and a lot of other things, a guru. And he said, to know and not to do is really not to know. And you've done this for years, Tom, and you know this stuff. And that separates, I think, the people that really not only know it and lead organization, but can get their hands in the middle of it and how to do it and how to coach other people through it. So, we've known each other for a long time, but I really, really enjoyed personally this presentation, what you shared. I mean, it's chock full, and I'm hoping that James is able to convince you to do some other ones in the future, because as you know, this can be endless.
Well,
but
we still have 20 minutes.
Yeah, we want to see more continuous Tom. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I like that. I like that. I want to see more of that too. I'll go through here and look at a couple of other slides, and
okay,
a lot of this is the jargon, if you will, and one of the things, you talked a little bit about, Jerry. You hit on one question, and I'm thinking back on it now. How do you get people to adopt standard work and the adoption phase of it and that type of thing? I think that I have always used a philosophy that was more along the lines of, I'm not gonna scare you with all the jargon and that type of thing. I'm not gonna ask you to do Minitab. I'm not gonna ask you to do that unless that's what you're being trained to do, obviously. But it's like, let's just be real and let's focus on what the problem is here and try to fix it. And I think we were talking about some of the terminology that we use. Lean is not as bad, I don't think, as it is with things like FMEA and you start to use things like the root cause analysis and the fishbone and the cause and effect diagram. And sometimes people are like, I don't like diagramming. I never liked it when I was taking English, so I definitely don't want to do diagramming. The other part of it is brainstorming. A lot of these tools are brainstorming tools that you can use and can build on each other in the future. Kind of like you were talking about voice of the customer. And I think what I liked about doing what I did more than anything else is making people aware that even though you might be stuck in a back room, working on a piece of paper with no idea who that customer is, when you hold that customer or when you hold that piece of paper, you're holding something, or you're looking at that screen, that customer. That customer might as well be sitting right in front of you, because you're doing something that's going to impact their life, in whether it be the transaction or that type of thing. But I guess really it's seeing the value in what you do and looking along those lines. I can take this wherever you guys want to go from this standpoint in terms of looking at it. I know we've got 12 minutes left, something like that, 18 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, in 12 minutes, can I just say something, James, you mind?
Sure.
No. Tom, this has been fantastic. This is one of the best Christmas presents I've gotten. I'm a continuous learner, and wow, it's a great gift that you gave to the consortium, to the members, and I'm sure, James, this will be broadcast. This is a classic in my mind. I'm not throwing smoke at you. This is a classic. I love to hear people that can talk about the real stuff because they've done it, they've applied it, and you've had great way of communicating. So thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate it.
So, Tom, I think like the best use of the time, and we can take some questions, but wherever you would like to go to make sure that you're conveying what you want to convey. And again, like we would love to have you back to, do this again, talk
Sure.
about some other things. So,
Well, a lot of this it's like I said, the FMEA is an example, or the failure mode and effect analysis. There's so many different ways you can use any of these tools. You can tweak them, you can do them one way or another. I've used that tool, and I think that in itself could be kind of a presentation in itself. This one here, mistake proofing, that's something that one is the one that it's like, it particularly, James, you mentioned it, transactional. That always bothered me. Why don't we have the money to stop the mistake proofing here? If everything is automated, why are we having mistakes made here? And that is one of the things that you can look at. I mean, you can take different approaches. You can do it from a detection. You can do it from a defective or for a control perspective, or even a prevention. I like to look at the different controls. What's a preventative control? What's a detection? We had a way of defining QA is something that you've stopped before the customer sees the problem. QC was after the fact. So the customer may have not even know there was a problem, but there was a problem, and we go back and fix it. That whole step, if you adopt the lean methodology, that's waste, right? You shouldn't have to do that. You should have done it right the first time. Kind of like what's his name? Mike Caldwell. There's no room for excuses here. We gotta do, every play has to be executed correctly, right?
just some context. Tom and I are diehard Jaguars fans, and that's the defensive coordinator talking about perfection when they've been far from it recently. So interesting to see what happens.
Yes, defensive coordinator. Hopefully they'll be in good shape this week. They will be tested.
Tom, I believe Michelle Ortiz has a question. If we open.
Okay, Michelle.
I'll read it. Michelle has a question, Michelle Ortiz,
Okay.
regarding the controls aspect. When would you review the process to ensure sustainability before you see a failure, especially when there's a change in people or management, she said.
Repeat the question again.
Okay, and it's in the chat box too. Regarding the controls aspect, when would you review the process to ensure sustainability before you see a failure, especially when there's a management change?
Well, and I would probably, I'm going to answer the question this at a high level, and thanks, Michelle, for the question, but I would look at it from a standpoint that it's never too early to start the control aspect. You have to be able to monitor and measure how your process is working. The problem that many people have is that they're looking at they may have looked at a measure that is the wrong measure to look at. So in other words, let's say that I'm looking at turn time, and I want my turn time to be on the average 20 seconds per application, something like that. But what I really want is I want to know if my people are working. So I want to measure their productivity. Which one is going to get me in more trouble? Do I look at how many apps did they process per hour, or do I look at turn time? There can be different levels of variation. Maybe I need to look at both. But to answer your question, I think you have to chart those and look at them. In part of this presentation here, I have something, and that's a great question, because that's the piece that most people do not like to do. But this is something called a control chart. And I didn't mean to flip there. Let's go back here. And this is basically just showing you, in this case here, it's saying on that particular day, or whatever the case may be, we were out of control at this point. these pieces here are measured on a daily basis, or it could be a weekly basis or a monthly basis, whatever the metric is calling for. But this gives you a way to look at, I'm fine with the way this is operating. And I think that gets back to this foundation is one of the reasons why when I say automated control, all you've done is automate potentially a bad process. This doesn't tell me that there's a lot of variation by looking at this chart, but it does tell me that there probably could be some improvements made in this process. And those are things that you would look at. But so to answer your question, I think constantly, you have to find out if things are stable. Obviously, when we did the trial, the first time we did a trial, it didn't necessarily work that well, but over the days we did it over and over, and we finally got it. I'm going to give you a case because I think this might help exemplify this even more. If you remember a couple of years ago, we had a mortgage crisis. Many of the banks, by the order of a judge, I think there were 23 states as an example, shut down. They could not foreclose mortgages. Why? Because there were so many errors in the process, and banks were foreclosing homes that didn't need to be foreclosed. In addition to that, banks were also having one person talk to the customer saying, we're going to have to foreclose your house, I'm sorry. And another person calling them later saying, hey, we've got a new loan for you and we're giving you a forgiveness and we want to make sure that you're applying for your forgiveness package. So you had the customer in between. So the judges, the court said, stop. That process was so involved that the only way that it could be 100% error-proof and resumed again was to prove that they could do it error-free, completely error-free. We didn't have any technology dollars. We didn't have anything to do. The only way we could do that was to basically, and this I hate to say this, we had to manually do all of the inspection. We had to go through 5 checkpoints, and we would still have errors after the 3rd and 4th. We had to continue to do that. When I say checkpoints, that means I give it to James. James looks at it and says, this is good. Jerry looks at it and says, perfect. And we had to do it in such a way that we didn't know that Jerry was looking at James and Jerry trusted James to be right. That was the biggest problem that we had in terms of doing that. But the process was so complex that we had to put that many checkpoints into it before we could get it down to the point that there were no errors. And it was a whole methodology and everything else. Subsequently, that's all been, obviously more automated from that standpoint, but it's pretty serious business when you start to take somebody's home and it's not justified. So,
well, Tom, would you say that set the foundation for automation?
It did. It definitely did. And then even from a standpoint, if you've ever closed on a home, I don't know. Yeah, the pile of paper is like this thick. It's 8 inches of paper, all documents and things like that you have to sign. It's almost equal that in terms of a foreclosure documents. So paper. And so James, what's happened is it's all scanned. It's now here. It's like it's on an electronic copy, and here's all the forms, and you're signing forms electronically and that type of thing. I don't know where that's going to go. I'm sure it's going to be interesting someday, because when I sign my name electronically, it doesn't look anything like my signature. So I don't know how, and it's never the same. So I don't know how you would ever tell.
Like I think sometimes can be painstaking to do manual like checks and that, but too many times you see companies automate and they're just automating waste. So it's like you have to do that hard work on the front end to make it easier down the line. So it resonates a lot with what you're saying.
So I guess really getting back to this, I would probably go back to, I'm going to go back to my favorite slide, one of my favorites. I've talked about my favorite slides, my favorite tools. I love this stuff. This one right here, Jerry, you talked about it before. You know, one of the things here, routines established to conduct regular voice of the customer analysis and Kaizen, or process improvement efforts as required. And then you're basically, it gets back to that culture. At the end of the day, you have to empower the people that do the work to improve on the work and to understand what they're doing and what the repercussions may be down the field. I do think it needs to be organized to some extent, because if you don't organize it, I might be producing bicycle wheels for James and what he really wanted was tires, you know, or a fossil fuel engine and he really wanted a new EV, that type of thing. So you got to be careful. And obviously communication is the key.
Tom, you know, I could see in the future, you know, these many kind of Tom sessions, you know, where it's either video or whatever, and then where you pick your favorite slides where you can distill it down and say, this is the essence of the most important things that your takeaways that you like to share, because I think it would have a tremendous impact.
Well, thanks. Appreciate it, Jerry, and I appreciate the time. If anybody has any questions, you know, James knows how to get in touch with me. Michelle knows how to get in touch with me.
I have one question for you, Tom. Have you finished your shopping for Christmas yet?
I'm actually going to start today.
Okay.
And you know, you talk about how paradigms change. Yesterday, Pam wanted to go to the mall, so we went to the mall. And the thing that surprised me is, boy, they're different now. It's not the way I remember them all. Now I know why I shop from Amazon.
Well, one of the reasons I shop from Amazon is their process is really good.
Yes,
Like you need really quickly, and you can rely on that. I just had a quick question about all this and putting this together. If you could talk a little bit about how to get a culture to buy in to doing things this way. I mean, we only have a few minutes. I'm sorry, but
Well, that's another session.
it is, and believe me, I've seen presentations on culture changes.
Mhm.
A lot of times what it involves is a sit down, tough talk conversation with the executive leader. And it's getting them out of the room, not in the room, so that people can freely talk and make changes and think about what there is. One recent situation we had was a micromanager. And this micromanager wanted to make sure that she was involved in every single aspect of the business. And she had some very high-priced people. Consequently, she had a lot of meetings, and the meetings didn't go unless she was at the meetings. And so that was one of the things that came out of the Kaizen is like, okay, we got to change this. You don't need to be in every meeting. You're paying people to do this. We can't clone you. So let's make some changes.
So it sounds like from what you're saying, I just want to make sure I have this right, is like there's the benefits of the Kaizen or rapid improvement event to solve this problem. It could even be some people issues, and you just
absolutely
need to make sure you're handling it with respect, and you know, just try to get it to the point where you want to get it, right?
If you look at it this way, and I probably would say, James, I've benefited mostly from the standpoint that I've come from good culture. And the one culture that was toxic is I would have to say had to be fixed. And it took me about maybe 2 weeks to realize that, hey, this is,
Yeah.
we can't fix anything unless we fix this culture. And so it kind of was like, okay, let's stop and let's go back. And I guess really from a standpoint in meeting with the exec, it was more like, am I the only one that thinks we have a culture problem here? And well, why do you think that? And then I presented a long list of things that I was seeing that I could attribute to culture, but probably more importantly, a way to address that. And addressing that was through a Kaizen with your group and that type of thing.
Okay, great.
Well, I guess James, you'll let Tom wrap this up because he's got to go out and wrap up the shopping.
Okay,
I'm going to wrap this up if you'd like. So we're going to send out slides. Tom, I'd like get the slides from you. We have some requests for those, so I can send out to our participants. That would be wonderful. Great stuff. Maybe our next session will be on the culture change management piece. I think that's a great topic to discuss later. But yeah, thank you guys for attending. And this has been a wonderful webinar on the financial aspects and how to apply lean to that. And with that, we're going to end it and just thank you for attending and have happy holidays.
I just want to
Merry Christmas, happy holidays. See you later.
just say one thing for everybody that our social media will have the links to this. I'll have the recording for people that want to go back and watch it, and we'll have some clips. We got a QR code right here. Michelle, I'll let you take it and we can close up.
Okay, it should be up.
Okay.
So if you'd like to scan that, that takes us to all our social media platforms and our website, and you can follow us for future events and our trainings and all of those things. So we would love to have you guys at our next webinar and our next training events. And if you have any questions, you can email us and email me at michelle@leanjacks.org.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. And thank you, Tom. This was fantastic. We really appreciate your insight here, and looking forward to reconvening and doing this again.
Sounds great. Okay. Thank you guys.
All right. Thanks, Tom.
Adios.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.